All right. I believe we are just now opening virtual auditorium for our 2 o'clock session, 2 o'clock Eastern time. This, of course, will be a global audience joining us. So let's just say at the top of the hour, welcome to everybody who's joining the anchor desk participants of our virtual conference. We like to do this to instill a sense of community.
Zan, we're having some technical issues with your audio breaking up a little bit. I don't know if you have earbuds or something you can put on. I see Saul has
In our
joined us.
gatherings, and so we have an opportunity here. All right. Well, Thomas, keep going. I will see what I can do.
Well, I want to welcome Saul to our pregame show here. Hi, Saul.
Hi, how are you?
You see our anchor desk here. I don't know if it's top or bottom on your screen, but I see George Vradenburg, who is our the founder and chair of the Us Against Alzheimer's not-for-profit, as well as the founder of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. I see Joan Mannick. She's the CEO of Tornado Therapeutics, geroscience long bio company working on mTOR pathways, compounds, not NCEs. I see Jamie Justice. She's the EVP of, I hope I get this, XPRIZE Health, and the executive director of the XPRIZE Health Span, I think, prize, one of, if not the largest prize to date in the XPRIZE part. I see Beth Stevens joining, so welcome.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, thank you.
Zan, how's your audio? I'm tap dancing.
Well, you tell me.
So far, so good.
Well, sorry, I'm not sure what the issue is. I've actually been working on technical issues at my end, but do tell me if I stop to be heard well. Well, I think we can start our little chat among very esteemed anchor desk participants. We bring people with very different backgrounds, but they are all in the hunt for ways of slowing the aging process in general, and in various ways preventing age-related diseases. And we start with George Vradenburg, who is quite an amazing person, not only in his grasp of all the challenges scientifically and otherwise involved in finding approaches to treat and prevent Alzheimer's, but he really has been on the ground making things happen. And so, George, we could go on and on about all the efforts you're leading, but why don't you give us an update on what you're doing right now, and maybe we'll come back to you later for some follow-up questions.
Sure. I'll just take 2 or 3 things here that we're doing. First, we're just trying to get a second disease-modifying drug that alters the course of Alzheimer's through the FDA. The FDA had an advisory committee meeting this week, positive vote, so we anticipate what will be the second disease-modifying drug. This drug has the effect of slowing down the progression of the disease by about 5 months over an 18-month trial. And modeling would suggest that about slowing the progression of the disease from early to moderate disease by about 1.5 years if you continue to take the drug. It has side effects. So obviously, we're looking for an innovation pipeline here that will get more powerful drugs and safer drugs. The next step, obviously, is to get these drugs actually embraced by a healthcare system that does not know how to deal with the brain at all in clinical practice. And so we're working in very, very large consortium, which we convene around blood-based markers, around digital cognitive assessments. What are the qualifying criteria for good blood-based markers and not good blood-based markers, and good digital cognitive assessments and not so good cognitive assessments, and how do we get them actually built into the businesses of health systems where there isn't a clear reimbursement pathway nor a clinical pathway for doctors or for patients in terms of pathway for patients. A totally almost unplowed field. Then obviously these two drugs that currently are on the market, these disease-modifying drugs, are now being tested in preclinical populations on the view that if you slow down this disease earlier in its course, you may be able, ideally, eventually, to be able to prevent symptomatic Alzheimer's, much like we do with HIV/AIDS. And then if you look further down the pike, probably about 8 to 10 years out, we're now working with a consortium of companies, regulators, and payers on Alzheimer's vaccines, which are now in phase 2s, and which will take some time to go through those phase 2s because they are being tested in preclinical populations. And there has not been sort of a history here yet of being able to approve vaccines based upon surrogate endpoints in Alzheimer's. So we're working with regulators to anticipate those problems. And obviously, if in fact some regulator actually approves this drug, what is the screening cost for people in preclinical populations who are a target for these vaccines? So we're trying to anticipate the preemption, as Kitalys has been talking about, a preemption of this disease by going earlier in the disease course, as we know that it begins 20 to 30 years before symptoms, and either stop it or slow it earlier in its course so we never get a symptomatic disease. It's a goal that I think is within reach in the next 10, 15 years, but it is a 10 or 15-year process at least, and we, as a patient advocate, basically trying to accelerate that process, anticipate problems, and solve them before we're confronted with actual drugs. So I'll stop there.
George, you are a key catalyst in those efforts, and we need all the catalysis we can get. So keep at it. And want to come back about vaccines in a moment, but good to see David Holtzman has joined us, and so we're almost complete on our panel. Let's go now to Joan Mannick, who is sort of a legend in the field of neuroscience. She's taken a therapeutic agent further than anybody, any organization, towards an age-related indication that is targeted at a neuroscience route. And in this case, Joan, you can maybe give a quick summary of what that was about, but give us an update on what you're doing right now.
Oh yeah, thanks, Zan. What I'm most passionate about is the mTOR pathway and a specific class of drugs, of which rapamycin is the best known. They're called rapalogs. And the reason I love this pathway in this class of drugs is that rapamycin has extended lifespan in every species studied to date. Yeast, worms, flies, and mice, and data just is coming out in abstract form that it's extending lifespan in primates. So there's something fundamental about inhibiting mTOR, which is what rapamycin does, and lifespan. And exactly why inhibiting this one protein extends lifespan isn't clear, but in preclinical species, it helps the function of certain aging organ systems, one of which is the brain. So this is an interesting sort of complementary approach to the targeting beta amyloid or tau in the Alzheimer's space. Could we also just try to target these fundamental pathways that underlie why aging organ systems decline as another approach? And it's much earlier than anything that George was talking about, but I think it's exciting. And so I love the mesh of this particular session where you have the experts in the neurodegeneration field, and then you have sort of people in both fields like Saul, and kind of how can we sort of span these two areas of aging biology and neurodegeneration?
Wonderful. Well, so much more to talk about what you're actually doing right now, but we will come back to it. And by the way, we expect our anchor desk participants to engage with the panel later on towards the end of their discussion. But let's bring up Jamie Justice, who has made an amazing transformation just in the past year from a preeminent researcher, investigator in the field of neuroscience to now heading up a very exciting program at XPRIZE. So Jamie, without further ado, give us the summary of what you're doing at XPRIZE.
Yeah, thank you, Zan. It's an honor to be here. You know, I'm an unrepentant academic still at heart. I still do hold a faculty appointment, though adjunct only for the time being. And last year, after spending years working on frameworks for testing translation of therapeutics, whether again, you know, of any variety of things that if you could actually target aging, how would you know? How do you measure it? How do you test it? How does the regulation work? And so doing this work of going from cells, mice to human trials, whether these were early stage first in human trials, which we had done some work with Jim Kirkland in one of the first senolytic trials, to where I got to know Zan and Connexium better was actually spent years working with Nir Barzilai, Steve Krzyzewski, and others on the TAME trial. So again, how do you go from a cell in a mouse up to something like a phase 3 regulatory facing trial for aging? You know, of which, of course, how do you measure it? How do you think about it? And as Joan said really eloquently, right, if we're looking at these upstream biologic factors, which I know Saul is going to talk about as well, and, you know, begin to look at some of these pathways for therapeutic opportunities that span any disease class. And, you know, that this is really where we begin to talk about aging, which, you know, certainly, you know, the brain is incredibly, incredibly important as both cause and consequent to many of the downstream factors. I mean, it really is incredibly important. But, you know, but how then do we also interface with aging, which is more than any one disease, more than any one phenotype? And so taking an approach that goes from, you know, function, phenotype, and the biology and how we begin to test these frameworks. And so that's really what we have the chance to do with XPRIZE is having tried to do some of this network approach. You know, before as an academic, it's really hard to get alignment without either using a stick or a carrot. And, you know, and here was a chance that, you know, I got a cold call about a year ago that they had raised over $100 million and they needed somebody who was unbiased, basically, who, you know, my interest has always been in the testing and the frameworks and how we set this up and how we address the questions and actually do global community building. And that's essentially what we've done is we have $101 million to dangle at the end of a very big stick and say, okay, if we're going to run these into early stage trials, let's at least have a level playing field so that we can begin to make comparisons across therapeutics and really push the field because things we don't know, right? First, endpoints, what we're looking at is that, you know, aging is more than one thing, but cognitive function is one of the key cornerstones, as is physical function, so like muscle. And of Joan's work was really informative here, immune function. You know, we just made it through a pandemic where we've learned that if we, for older adults, really important factors is need to maintain productivity and engagement, have to have mental faculty in order to do so, cognitive ability, physical function to be able to participate in life physically, and then have the resilience in order to leave your home comfortably and engage. And so these are really the cornerstones of what people often care about. And it's not specifically disease-based. It's really its function forward and engagement. And so how do we begin to build testing frameworks around that that still allow for the deep biology, that still allow for testing of things that could be very informative, important to specific disease processes like Alzheimer's disease, but still have a broad enough base that, that again, we can move forward and ask questions we don't have answers to and allow the actual community to work together to begin to define them. Who do you test these therapeutics in? George talked about this really well. You know, about, you know, how early in the process do you go? Where do you go with prevention versus treatment? And leaving some of those questions up for competitors to innovate is that this is a great chance to actually let the global scientific community tell us how we should do this. All we're doing is laying a foundation, allowing people to come together and give us comment and help form the field together through a competition. Again, there's enough money out there that we're hoping to get people down that pathway to try to go forward and help actually form the field together as a collaborative rather than one-offs. So that's my whole spiel, and I'm actually in a really fortunate
That's a
position.
great spiel.
Rather than
What are
leading,
some
I
of
mean, I get a chance, I just get to be of service to the scientific community. And I mean, it really is. That's what this position feels like. It's very much as a nonprofit. So it's a whole lot of labor and a whole lot of love.
Well, so exciting. What specific carrots are you offering right now?
That's
Uh,
great. So we're
talk about that.
currently in a pre-registration phase for the rest of this month. We're still inviting public comment. We've had so much public comment, and we're revising some of our testing frameworks. How do we re-envision what success would look like? How do you de-risk a larger phase 3 trial? These are phase 2 trials that we're going to be promoting. And we're looking at those frameworks. We're in pre-registration now. We open for primary registration at the end of July. We were hoping that would be the beginning, but it'll be the end of July. Qualifying submissions for our interested teams will come in at the end of the year by December 20th. That's a pen and paper submission showing your research and discovery to date. And then going from there is by next year, these teams need to be in early stage proof of concept studies. And again, the purpose there isn't really to get major measurement characteristics. It's to show us, do you have a therapeutic that actually affects aging? Do you have a clinical center you can test these in? Can you actually bring people into the center? Do you have data that can be submitted? I mean, it's almost a run-in for the finals. And, given the R&D to date, the ability to recruit, the strengths of the investigative team, the promise of the therapeutic, we'll advance those on. Our finalists in 2026 will each receive $1 million. I know it's not enough to run a one-year trial, but and we'll also be trying to set up with as many investment strategies and platforms as we can and funding opportunities for those teams. Finalists will go out, run a one-year study, and they have to show that their therapeutic within the course of that year can improve muscle, cognitive, and immune function. Not 1, 2, but all 3. And so it is a very rigorous design that we're putting forward, and that they have the opportunity collectively. The total prize purse is $101 million. But for the finalists, the awarding of that will be dependent on the magnitude of the effect that's shown. So the best team to improve all 3 will win.
Wow. Well, very exciting. And we look forward to watching the progress of that competition.
Yeah, and I look forward to hopefully having some of the people on this call. Again, we have an opportunity. What do we measure? What therapeutics work? What strategies can be used either alone or in combination? How do we actually get these out of the lab and to real people who need answers now?
Oh, terrific. So much more to be said. And we are today focusing on neurodegeneration as a general target, but of course, we're all interested in some of the other aspects of the aging process, all of them. And Thomas, we do plan to come back to some other therapeutic areas that are, let's call them age-related conditions that important to target. You might just sort of give us a glimpse of what we might be doing in the next 6 months.
It caught me a little bit, eyes wide, because we are looking at areas like we're developing programs in the sarcopenia or medical devices, et cetera. What I can announce, saving it for the closing little spiel, housekeeping spiel, is that we are organizing sessions on draft legislation, actually, for a regulatory pathways to health span products. So I think you'll find a little bit interesting. It's like watching the chef's kitchen table. You can watch the sausage being made of trying to figure out exactly how we can make tangible, tractable progress in that area. Everybody wants to do it, but it requires folks who are familiar with the process. Another one Zan's been working on is on biomarkers. actually with one of the colleagues you know well, Jamie, Steve Kalut, and I guess endpoints as well, because that's really, really important. I mean, everybody in the field is looking at biomarkers to start as surrogate markers, but Joan will know. I think she'll have opinions on registrable endpoints, given her experience with the agency. We can certainly look for tangible clinical signs, and they could be sufficient for normal approval. And George, obviously, if we're able to get reversal of symptoms, that should not be that should be a nice conversation with the FDA, because they can clearly see what the clinical benefits are. So it'd be interesting to see what the field can do in those areas. I see Larry's joined us, so we have both of our moderators here. So we're ready to go. We got 10 minutes to the start of the seminar.
Well, just to say that we will be coming back with what I believe would be a very rich offering of sessions, if not in person, or at least longer conference than the 2-hour session we're doing today. We're particularly interested in engaging FDA on regulatory pathways that will be suitable for the various candidates for neuroscience related indications. And there is complexity and challenges. It's time and resources and making things happen sooner than they otherwise will if we leave our current conditions as they are for evaluating and approving regulated products. So that is a major area of interest of ours, and we're hoping to come back at the end of the year with a very robust effort that will engage FDA and other important stakeholders in this process. So here we are with all of our panelists assembled, and I'll start off acknowledging Lee Rubin at Harvard and thanking him heartily for agreeing to co-moderate this session. And he has been working hard with Larry Steinman. Larry is another force of nature and a dear colleague of mine. We go back a number of years over a quest in another therapeutic area, but we also together co-founded the predecessor conference that started in 2017 in London. And Larry, we all recall, just stepped off the plane because of a family obligation and walked right into the conference right on time. And it was a great
After
start.
a red eye from California to London.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Get the context right.
Larry brings the long history as a co-founder of the conference and a mover and shaker in many other ways. So delighted to have Larry and Lee to moderate the session. Before we do get started with the panel, we have a few more minutes. There's no reason that David Holtzman, you can't just chime right in. Saul, you've heard some things that might have piqued your, made you think you'd like to comment.
And Beth and Tony.
And Beth and Tony, we're so honored to have all of you. And we like to make this informal, so we're not standing on ceremony. We're not going to formally start the session until the top of the hour, but we do have a few more minutes before we do that. As our audience begins to grow or continues to grow.
And just a reminder that our conference brand is not to have a bunch of talking heads at a lectern. It's much more like a dinner salon. So just if we're having a nice dinner and having a conversation about topics of interest to us, please let at it. And the hypothesis is certainly for me and for the audience, they'll find that actually very interesting and worthwhile. So,
and by the way, though I'm so sorry that we can't just have people popping out of the audience going up to the microphone for questions. At least you can put your questions in the Q&A function of the Zoom feature, and do use the chat function. We'd love to see your greetings from Madrid or wherever you may be right now. And we also like to see the substantial comments that are often made. We capture these and often we'll follow up with you and try to
There are
address.
actually some questions in the Q&A function already, and there's a comment by Peter Cador of his therapeutic approach that could be relevant to Alzheimer's.
Yeah. And we did receive a number of impressive, very substantial questions from those who registered. So we've got more questions than we could possibly cover, but we'll do our best. We often will come back with some answers in our transcript that will follow and become available within a few days of this conference being completed.
I guess I'd also comment, many seminars, webinars, conference sessions are one and done. Our vision, we're not quite there yet. We'd like to build a community, but if there are follow-on discussions, some of the most interesting things that we could develop further, we're very friendly, we're open. Please email us and we'll see whether we can't get a continuing conversation going with panelists and others. So don't think of it as you've attended something and you've gone home and that's it. Hopefully we can keep an exchange of ideas going.
So Thomas and Zan, do you guys mind if I address? There's one that popped in. Somebody, Michael Goldstrom, is interested in
Right
behavioral health and lifestyle change versus predominantly pharmaceutical. And I can't speak to what the panelists, I believe, today will speak about, but I can tell you from a position I now get to sit in is actually listening to what the research community globally is interested in working on. And I would say that at least when we're thinking about aging and also neurodegeneration from some of the groups that are coming in, is certainly pharmaceutical is a strong interest. But I would have to say almost about 50% of those who are pre-registering for this global prize that we're running are actually looking at things in combination with some lifestyle or behavioral intervention. So whether that is like caloric restriction or other, food or dietary restriction or eating food clocking patterns, that there is certainly a really rich history and conserved effects across species. Again, really going into some of those nutrient sensing pathways that Joan and mTOR inhibitors, that there's a rich history of looking for things within lifestyle and behavior, whether alone or in combination. And I would say certainly we're seeing it.
Yeah.
And
So I'll make a comment on this too, because we get the national government to commit to a national plan to prevent Alzheimer's through reduction of risk factors. And so the most promising effort here, well, there are a number of avenues that are being explored, both from a research and from an implementation point of view. The one that I am keen on is how to basically use the GLP-1s for cardiometabolic interventions in midlife, and then demonstrate the cost effectiveness of doing that at a national level in order to reduce future Alzheimer's. That is a bit way out there in terms of a national plan, but if I can get a country to commit to using major screening and implementation of GLP-1s, I'm hopeful to get the GLP-1 providers to get their price down so that it becomes cost effective to actually not only reduce obesity and hypertension and diabetes, but demonstrate that in fact you're reducing significantly over the next 5 to 10 years with respect to those populations.
Well, George, indeed, the session you co-chaired included the CEO of Lilly, and he famously made the provocative statement that, in speaking to the head of the FDA equivalent, the NHRA, that let's make the UK obesity free. And so
demonstrating the cost effectiveness of that, I think, is a great challenge.
And we had the
price of these drugs, but nevertheless, I think it is a viable strategy to reduce future dementia, as well as reducing, obviously, obesity, diabetes, and hypertension.
Well, wonderful point, and what a rich discussion. I wish we had about 2 hours more, but we are coming to the top of the hour, and I want to welcome all of our participants and the audience, which is global, and joining us for what will be such an important discussion about targeting neurodegeneration as a condition that should be approachable as a target for avoiding versus just treating. So enough from me. I would like to just turn the floor over to our co-chair,